Hello ladies and gentlemen, once again at Photog J the Great, Jeremy Smith, coming back with you this week to talk about the new Sony SLT-A57. Last week we took a look at the Nikon D3200. Anyways, this is the A57. I felt like this would be a very logical camera for us to talk about because it's one of the main competitors to the Nikon D3200. We're going to take a closer look at it. You can kind of see it there. Some of the things that are different about this camera over the previous A55. This one has a larger battery, so it uses the Sony FM500 battery. Quite a bit larger. You're going to get about 300, 200 more shots per charge. So the issues that people have with the battery life on the A55 are going to be solved on this model. I also like the fact that on this one they decided to make it slightly larger. This is basically the same body as the A65 except with different electronics inside. The A55 was basically modeled after a lot of Sony's compact cameras, which is nice if you have smaller hands, but it was kind of a little bit too small. So the A57 is a little larger. I still feel like it'll fit smaller hands okay as well, but it's a much better happy medium on this model. So these are just some of the things that come immediately to the forefront of my mind as I look at this. The other thing that I like about it is the fact that it's a 16 megapixel sensor, very similar design as the one in the SLT-A55, the NEX 5 and NEX 5N, and also it's a similar sensor to the Nikon D7000. Sony did update the processing on this one, so in theory we should see cleaner images at high ISO and things like that. Anyways, now we're going to take a closer look at the camera itself. Okay, now we're going to take a real quick close-up look at everything on the camera. As I mentioned earlier, it is a little bit larger body now. It's basically the exact same size as the A65, which is nice. It is a little bit better if you have larger hands, but it's still not just too big in my opinion. So it's a nice happy medium. It is also nice that you have the larger battery, the FM500, I believe it's called, from the A65 and A77. So that's something that's very, very nice to have. Everything's pretty standard here. I'm not going to bore you guys and go over all the every little picky details as far as connectors. A lot of standard things here. It is a standard USB connection, mini HDMI. You have your power input there, and then of course you have a actual physical remote jack, which is nice. The other thing that's nice to have on this, of course, is the microphone jack, which is something that you used to have to go up to a higher end DSLR to get. You actually now have on an entry level model. Something that this doesn't have that the D7000, excuse me, that the D3200 didn't have is the fact that it has a swiveling screen here. So that's something that's very, very nice. Looks like Nikon is going to make us pay a little bit more to have this feature on their 5200 whenever it finally shows up. But it is nice to have a swiveling screen on a camera at that $699 price point. So that's one thing I like already. I've got a zillion fingerprints on this already. Dedicated movie button. Everything's pretty standard fare here. A few unique things. So let me refocus the camera. A few unique things about this. It does have a digital zoom feature, and Sony they've come out with a newer version of this, so apparently it's supposed to do a little bit better now than just standard digital zoom. I still recommend you just use your image editing software to adjust that after you actually take the photo, but it is an interesting feature to have built in. This camera is 16 megapixels. There's not a huge difference between 16 and 24 megapixels in the grand scheme of things. But if you're going to print larger than like 11 by 14 and you want to crop in a lot, the D3200 could be better in that regard. But 16 is still going to be enough. If you're shooting sports and you're wanting to do so on a budget, that would be an area where this camera is going to excel. The 3200 is pretty impressive at 4 frames a second and 24 megapixels. This one, however, can do up to 12 frames a second if you put it over in this mode here. I believe Sony calls this like teleextender, continuous or something like that. Basically what it does is it records an 8 megapixel image instead of a 16 megapixel image, and it crops in on the photo by 1.4 times. So basically it allows the camera to shoot faster, and it gives you a little bit more reach. So if you're using a 200mm lens, you're going to get about 280 out of it. Well, actually no, you'd have your regular crop factor in then, so you'd end up somewhere in the neighborhood of somewhere close to 500, which is actually quite impressive. So that's something that's kind of unique to Sony. I do like the fact that on this camera it does support AVC HD 2.0. So basically, if you want to shoot video of anything that's moving very quickly, you have the option of shooting it 60 frames per second. So that's something that's nice. That's not an available option on the 3200. On the 3200 in 1080p you can only do up to 30 frames a second. If you want to shoot a little faster, you can drop down to 720p. Very, very unique features on this camera. I hope to take this out and do more shooting with it, and I will have some samples for you guys to look at. But until then, this is Photog J the Great, Jeremy Smith, signing off once again. If you have any questions, definitely write me in the comments, and certainly subscribe. Until next time, have a good evening.